My name is Liz Beecroft. I'm a licensed clinical social worker based in Brooklyn, New York. I am a therapist in private practice, and I am the founder of MENTL.SESH, which is my private practice, as well as a community-based brand working to decrease the stigma and make conversations about mental health more digestible by meeting people where they're at. So we're here today working on a collaboration, going to have a long discussion about mental health, but it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and that is really what brings us together. The importance of Mental Health Awareness Month is to raise awareness, is to teach people how to have conversations and fight past the shame and guilt that we might feel in talking openly about our feelings and our emotions. But mental health goes beyond the month of May, and it is something that each and every single one of us has. It's a 24/7, 365 type of thing. So today we'll be talking a little bit about Jeff's mental health, and I'll take it and leave it over to you to introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Jeff Staple of Staple Pigeon and Read Art Department. This is really an important topic for me, and I'm honored to be here in Liz's presence. And this is a really cool collaboration that we're doing, because this is definitely the first time that I am wearing a collaboration and then going through a mental therapy session in order to launch that collaboration. So we are wearing the collection and launching it by, Liz putting me through the mental ringer, if you will. So I feel like the lab rat that's experimenting on myself here. But I'm excited, and I really recently, especially through this pandemic, have realized the importance of mental health and taking care of yourself. I'm trying to do my part in just doing exactly what you said, which is stopping the stigmatism that is associated with therapy, mental therapy and help. And so hoping we could spread the word, and also by me opening myself up through Liz and her guidance, I'm hoping you guys can learn something as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into this conversation. To start out, I obviously know who you are, that's how we're here today, but for the people who are watching, besides the Jeff Staple that everyone knows, as a public figure, who is the real Jeff Staple?
I think at the root of it, I'd like to think of myself as a teacher. I was a teacher. I taught in schools and universities, and it's something that's really passionate to me. I've done Parsons, NYU, Columbia University. I've done speaking engagements at various functions, and I do it because I feel like a warm feeling inside whenever I do that. And we'll get to this later, I'm sure, but the philosophy of when you feel something warm, you should just swim towards it is a key to the success of life, And so if I feel good doing it, I'm just going to try to keep doing more and more of it. I also now teach on this platform called Skillshare, which is an online learning platform. And I always said to myself from the very beginning of when I started Staple that if Staple were to ever fail along the way, and knock on some wood, but it's been 25, we're going on the 25th anniversary of Staple, which is pretty epic. If Staple were to ever cease to exist, I would just go straight into teaching. That's what I would do, full time.
So helping people.
I guess, yeah. And Staple is really just the medium in which to help people and to teach people. Instead of handing a kid a book, a textbook and a notebook, I'm handing them clothing, shoes, accessories, but there is lessons to be learned in those products.
So you shared how helping other people through education and giving them those types of skills is something that's valuable to you and core value. When it comes to core values, it's kind of what drives us as human beings and shapes our identity and plays a huge role in the decisions that we make. So when it comes to Jeff, what are your core values?
I don't know if this is a really good answer or not, but karma is a core value of mine. This idea of the golden rule, where do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. I've always just believed that, and I think early on in my life I was the victim of being treated like shit, and I didn't like that feeling. And I think when you get treated that way, you react one of two ways. You either say, I'm gonna now treat other people like shit, because that's how I was treated, or you go the other way, which is like, I don't want to do that to anyone what somebody did to me. And so, I went about it that way. And it could be on so many different levels. It doesn't even have to be, I think when people hear karma, they think like, oh my God, I have to do such good to everyone. It's like, you don't have to be Mother Teresa to every human you meet. You just have to like not be negative, like just put out positivity, you know what I mean? In the most nuanced way. And that's a golden rule that I live by today, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting too that you said like, it could go one of two ways. You could be like the person who wants to be that bully or be mean to other people, or you could take that and understand what that experience is like and not want other people to have that experience.
Exactly. Yep.
Where do you think that came from? Because when it comes to core values and stuff, a lot of those get shaped by how we grew up, the people around us growing up, our experiences in life, that being one of them. But do you think like your family had anything to do with that?
A little bit. I don't know, maybe a lot. My family was not really part of my life all that much growing up. They worked their asses off, first generation, like I'm first generation, they immigrated here. And like every immigrant family, they had to work 3 times as hard to make the minimums of what everyone else was doing. And so they worked their butt off 7 days a week, 18 to 20 hour days. And I was basically left home alone for the most part. I also had no brothers and sisters. So there was a forced need to learn how to be independent from the start. And again, even that you could take one of two ways. You could either lash out and be like, how much am I missing out on by not having these people around? Or, you just have to figure it out, how to like entertain yourself, educate yourself, inspire yourself. And I don't know where that came from. I think when you get that far back into life, there's maybe like just genetics and DNA are involved maybe, because I don't know where else it comes from at that point. But yeah, I do credit my family for trying their best to give the best life that they could. And to a lot of immigrant families, that equates to money. Like we talked about, is money a core value? And it's like, unfortunately, this is my experience. I can't speak for all families, obviously, but I find that with a lot of immigrant families, especially from Asia and China and Hong Kong, money is like a metric of success, because it's hard for them to articulate feelings of like love and unity and like familial things as like, oh, I have a loving family, hence I'm successful. It's quite easy to poke holes in that. Right? Like, oh, how much love does their family have? It's hard. But when it's like, oh, you have that car, oh, you have that much in your bank account, it's like, I can easily see you're successful because you drive a BMW. But that doesn't actually, we all know now that like those are just facades that cover up like real happiness, know.
And I can imagine too, just like seeing your family out there working, going after it and doing everything they could do was really modeling for you those values,
Yeah.
And, when people talk about money and, not necessarily that being a bad thing to be a value, because that creates stability for a lot of people.
Yes.
And stability is one of our basic needs in life. So to be able to have that stability is a way to show love to other members of your family.
That's very factual. But I will say that, I'm in my mid-40s now. And I spent 40 years of my life programmed to think the bigger your wallet, the more happy you are. And I'm trying to unprogram myself from that. And it's a challenge. Yeah.
So growing up in the 80s, what were your inspirations?
Not a whole lot. I grew up in a very colorful society. Like I grew up in the middle of New Jersey. I was very marginalized in terms of being a minority. And so I didn't have a lot of close role models. There was a lot of discreet, indirect jabs of racism almost on a daily basis growing up. It wasn't like burning crosses on front lawns, but it was like small jabs every single day from the age of 0 to 18. And so there weren't a whole lot of role models. I would say Bruce Lee was a huge role model because he was the only person that looked like me on a screen at the time. And he's dope as hell, obviously. And then hip hop music was a huge thing for me because the words that they were saying, even though they were likely written about someone else's life, the African American, struggle and what they were going through. For some reason, whatever I was going through, I made a connection to it. I felt the words, and then if you combine those two things, like the philosophy of Bruce Lee, and then like the aggression and anti-establishment of hip hop culture, that those two things were like core to my DNA, And then when Wu-Tang came out, it was like they gave birth. Like it's like, oh my God, RZA did it. Like he's like it's everything, And that made a huge impact for me too, obviously. Yeah. As with a lot of kids of the 90s now, because it came 10 years later.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Bruce Lee, hip hop music.
Yep.
Wu-Tang.
Yeah.
How did those influences shape or play a role into where you are today and your business ventures as you started your journey?
So, well, with Wu-Tang, it was really dope because I actually got to meet the RZA a few times, which was a huge milestone. If you think about Jeff Ng, that's my government name, pre-Jeff Staple, not having conceived of Staple yet, listening to 36 Chambers and Gravediggers 24/7 and like memorizing all the words, and then getting to a point in the brand that I've built where like RZA was asking for me to meet me. That was like a mind-blowing moment. And that actually happened with a bunch of different heroes of mine, particularly in hip-hop culture. Obviously Bruce Lee passed away, but like I remember I listened to a ton of Common and then got to design Common's album cover. I listened to a lot of Black Star, then ended up designing Kweli's album cover. Listened to a ton of Outkast, and now Andre and I are like close friends. It's really like I pinch myself every day because these people were the architects for my life. And then they say don't meet your heroes, but no, I'm so happy I met these people, So to answer your question, one of the things that the RZA taught me that was really key was and this is a music analogy, but he said in music you can be one of two ways. You can be very like secretive about the way you make your music and about your beats and about like how you write rhymes and stuff, or you can give away the formula. Just give it away. This is how I make music. This is how I write rhymes. This is how I make albums, right? And without any expectation of money or a fee, but knowing that the universe will give it back to you somehow, some way. Yeah. And when he taught me that, I was like, wow, because I kind of used to be, and streetwear is a lot like this. There's a lot of cliques in streetwear, right? Where it's like, nah, I'm not showing you my shit, Yeah. But when he said that, that's when I was like, Skillshare, teaching, talks, mentorship, like just give away the formula.
I mean, it aligns so well with your value of karma.
Yeah, it really clicked.
It does, yeah.
And it felt good doing it. It didn't feel like I was getting taken advantage of. And I just got on that horse and I just rode it. And also, I think, as it pertains to my career, my reputation, because in streetwear that was so rare, like you have to remember, like, if anyone's gone to like the Supreme store, what that feels like. Like the brand is made to make you feel like shit, right? Like to feel like an inferior peon. And there's an allure to that because there's a bit of like a mafioso type thing, like Godfather type mentality happening. But then when you go and meet me or go to my store, it was like the complete opposite. So, what RZA and other artists taught me was actually ended up being the unique sort of selling point of Staple too, that like this positive social contagion that we adapt versus fuck 'em, which is like the complete opposite, Yeah. And I'm not talking shit about Supreme. I think they're an amazing business, but they built it on fear and intimidation versus open arms and like education, you know?
Which is, yeah, very different values.
Yeah.
And a huge influence on how we put everything out into this world.
Yeah.
You know, which is wild to even think, like, who knows what was going on, you know, when decisions were being made behind those doors. But when it, maybe we do know, but when it comes to work, and, you know, I want to get more into, like, your journey and hearing about just how everything came to be, but how do you now create a work-life balance between your personal life and your family, and then you know, having to be on set filming things? And
I spend so much time adjusting and fine-tuning that work-life balance. Like, that is one of my daily life hacks that I'm constantly fine-tuning. And I obsess about it, probably in a bad way, which is something that we should maybe, you can help me with. But I get obsessed with this idea that there's 24 hours in a day, and everyone has the same 24 hours, okay? And then I obsess further that you can kind of put everything in your life, to me, in my life, into 3 buckets. One is health and well-being. Second is family, your foundation, close friends, loved ones, your people, your crew. Third one is your work, because unfortunately, unless you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth, you have to work and you have to make a living, right? So the first one, that involves, excuse my French, but like sleeping, shitting, pissing, eating, right? That, like, these are health things that you have to do. Like, scientists say you should move for 30 minutes a day. You should stand up. You should take a walk. I'm not even talking about people who like go to the gym and work out like gym rats. Just, you should walk for 30 minutes. You should sleep for 8 hours. You should, you know, drink a gallon of water a day. If you drink a gallon of water a day, you know, you're probably going to be peeing 5 times. Like, all of these things I've calculated takes about 9 to 10 hours. Yeah. Right? 9 to 10 hours. 8 hours sleep, like, you know, all that stuff is 9 to 10 hours, okay, eating. Then you've got work. The average worker is 8 hours a day, 9 to 5, right? 6 to 8 hours a day. 10 plus 8 is 18. There's only 24 hours in a day now, right? So you've got 4 to 6 hours left for every loved one, family member, friend, confidant that you have. And then there's still no time for just you, just yourself, right? And it's like, you wonder why 51% of marriages end in divorce. You wonder why there's so much personal stress in your life, and how, you know, you're beefing with friends, and there's this, how do you balance all of that? I didn't even factor in Instagram, into which people spend 4 hours a day on Instagram,
and
right?
if you have more than one, you know, source of income, you know, not even just one job.
Exactly, yeah. So now, okay, so this, it's funny because I really try to check myself, and like, even thinking about that creates anxiety in myself. Like, I could feel my blood boiling even talking about that, because I stress about this idea of like, what do I do? Like, okay, and if you adjust any of these levers, there's a ramification to it, right? So it's like, all right, I want to spend more time with my wife, my children, my family. I really want to do that. Okay, you're going to take 2 hours away from your sleep, or 2 hours away from your work. And what happens in American society is, because we can't stop working because we have to make the money, it comes out of sleep usually, and health. And that's why we're such an unhealthy nation, because people are just like cutting it out of there, you know? We don't have the ability to just be like, I'm only gonna work 4 hours a week from now on. You know, we can't do that. Yeah. And so all of these things have sacrifices, and I'm always trying to, I'm always trying to fine tune that balance of like, how to have the best work, health, and life situation.
It's funny because you mentioned about like only having 24 hours in a day, and I watched your 24 hours with Jeff Staple interview, and you mentioned that, you said basically like, you know, people consider other people at times being selfish for saying no to something that they don't want to do.
Yes.
And the idea of like setting boundaries, and, you know, just hearing everything you're saying, it makes sense why you would have to set boundaries, why we in general as people need to set boundaries
Yes.
to create that work-life balance. That is that is setting a boundary.
Yeah, exactly. Like, let's say in that scenario that I just painted, some situation happened where a family member or a good friend said, "Can I crash with you?" Mm-hmm. Right? Like, yeah, you want to help them, but it's like, well, people don't usually break it down this scientifically, but like, if they come into my studio and live with me for X amount of time, it's going to set these things off. Now, if you really love them and you care for them, you should do that. But if that goes on for like 2 weeks or even a month, it's like, it's really disruptive, you know? And so now there's this idea of, if you say no to that loved one staying over, you may be labeled as selfish. Like, oh, you're so selfish. You have the couch. You're not going to let me stay there. You know what I mean? But it's not, because it's really self-care. It's really protecting yourself. Mm-hmm.
It throws your structure and your routines off.
Yeah. Yep.
And when that happens, our equilibrium, that's like, it creates anxiety. It creates frustration. At times, resentment for people. And
then you're going to reflect that back on the person that you were just trying to help now.
Yeah.
I've heard it so many times where, like, they've come in, you've let them stay, and then you end up fighting about something, and then you don't talk for like 6 months because of some issue that happened. Whereas I might have to take the L up front and be like, yes, you're going to call me selfish for now, but we'll be better later on, And those are really hard decisions to make. And sometimes, like, not everyone gets that. Not everyone can see that right now, And
that's, when you think about, like, the idea of self-esteem and like identity, a lot of people who struggle and who have low self-esteem are often people pleasers. That's one of the symptoms of low self-esteem. So that also is a whole thing for anyone who is struggling with low self-esteem,
saying yes to everybody and everything,
being that yes man, and just being able to set those boundaries is really a way to also work on your self-image and eliminate some of that self-doubt.
That is so deep and true. And then the other thing is, I think it's almost like a self-perpetuating prophecy, where when you become known as the person that says yes every time, there are people that are just like, oh, ask her, she'll always say yes, and she's so nice, she'll always do it. And then you become that person that just gets trampled on.
That's your baseline.
That's your baseline.
And then when eventually you get to that point where you're going to be like, no. And this happened to me personally, like with the job, where I was super eager. I wanted to go in there and show like what I could do, and yes to everything. And then it got to a point where that was my expectation. And then I got burnt out. And I was like, screw this. I got to the point where I was like, I was very resentful. And I was being asked to do things that were not part of my job, because Liz will always say yes to them.
Yeah, exactly. And then the deeper you get into that, when you finally stand up for yourself and say, no, I'm not going to do it, they'll be like, what's wrong with you? Mm-hmm. What's wrong with you today? You must be having a bad day. I'll ask you tomorrow. It's crazy,
Yeah. People get thrown off by boundaries, so it's important to set them from the jump.
Yep.
So I'm also curious, when this industry is very cutthroat. Mm-hmm. I feel like every single day we see a new brand or designer or something creative popping up, and I think social media plays a huge role in that.
Huge.
Do you ever feel pressure to almost like keep up with the Joneses, or stay relevant in society or in this community, in this industry?
I mean, absolutely. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. I look at other peers in my industry, and for the most part, I try to get inspired by what they're creating and their hustle, and it motivates me to keep going. I think that is the positive way you could look at that. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't moments in the week where I look at something and I feel like left out, because I'm home on my sofa looking at it while there's like this event happening, or this thing that I didn't get on the VIP list, I didn't get an invitation to. It creeps in all the time, but I think it's really important to not dwell on those. And I know some people really let those moments infect their brain, you know what I mean? And I just try to mute it out. I just feel like I think my advice would be like, don't take these things personally. Mm-hmm. Like, it could have been an oversight. It could have just been like, people have other lives going on. They have lots of things in their lives. They're not attacking you by not making you part of their thing. You know what I mean? And quite frankly, all the other stuff is like, you should strive to get yourself to the point where you're in a position where you're doing things that other people are feeling FOMO about. You know, like, I'm not saying you should work to make other people feel FOMO, but you should just work on yourself. You know, just do you. You don't have to worry about all the other stuff that's happening. But take inspiration from, like, holy cow, like, that's amazing what he or she is constantly doing, you know? That's what I try to get out of it.
Yeah. I know, too, another value you've mentioned in past interviews is the idea of maintaining a legacy. You know, being considered an OG in this space, and, you know, seeing how trends change from season to season or year to year. And then at the same time, probably experiencing FOMO and maybe hints of jealousy here or there. We're human, we all kind of go through it. What would you say to someone, you know, given we kind of live in this digital world where everything on social media is a highlight reel? How do you kind of help people, or even help yourself, get out of your head and not, you know, compare your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel?
It's the hardest thing to ride that line between feeling happy for someone else's success and not letting that turn into jealousy. Those are that degree of difference is like a centimeter. You know? And I mean, you hear it all the time, like, oh my God, I'm so happy for what you did. Like, it just turns like in 1 millisecond, you know? And so, like, always trying to be positive about that. But then I think, to answer your question, having that core foundation of family, loved ones back home, whatever home is for you. Home could be anything, really. You know, it could be a mental state of mind. But just when you're out there, and when I say out there, I mean on social media. You could be sitting on your sofa at home, but be out there looking at, like, the whole world and everything that's happening, and just know that, like, but I have this, my crew, my team, my family behind me, supporting me. And this is the most important thing to me. And while all these things that you see out there are like eye candy and they look really dope, it's nothing compared to what I have here. And if everyone thought that way, if everyone was just proud and confident of what they've built on the home front, there wouldn't be all this anxiety and FOMO and like jealousy out there, you know, because everyone would just be like, and, you know, I think when you're with your close crew, you hear a lot of people say, like, yo, how's the fam, how's the wife? Like, everyone is, like, proud of what they've built on the home front, you know? And just having that reliance. I know for me, that's like the biggest thing, because of the position I'm in, I'm seeing these, like, crazy worlds and these crazy people building these incredible universes. And it's easy for me to be like, well, why am I not at that level? You know, like, why am I not driving that car or some dumb shit, or why am I not vacationing at that resort, right? Like, these are the things that you see on Instagram, and then it's like you just turn around and it's like, well, I've got this incredible thing here that we're nurturing together, and so I'm really proud of that.
And sometimes the most incredible things really are the small things of, like, being able to, like, tuck your kids in, you know, or like being able to go out and, like, I don't know, play basketball with your family or your friends.
The problem with social media and all of the things that I just mentioned, whether it's like homes, cars, vacations, watches, art, sneakers, whatever it is, there's no end game to that. I've tried. Trust me. Like, you should see my sneaker collection. Like, there's always, you could buy the hottest kicks and guarantee you next week someone will throw another shiny object at you. You know, you could go on this amazing vacation resort, and you'll be at that resort, and you'll open Instagram, and someone will be at the better resort. Like, wait, there's 6-star resorts? I thought there was only 5-star resorts. Like, no, now you got to go to 6-star, son. Like, you know?
And then, and on top of that, just, like, having that, you know, support system and that those people in your life that you can really trust. Because I can imagine, too, with someone of who, like, with your status, there's a lot of people that come into your life that might not be there for the right reason. How do you navigate those situations? How do you kind of gauge, like, who's really there for you, who's really there as if trying to use you as a stepping stone, just wanting to be associated with you? Like, how does that happen? Because that's something that I think a lot of people at some point experience if you have some type of presence.
Even if it's just one, even if you're just interacting with one person, honestly, like it's having that BS radar meter is really key. So that you don't get taken advantage of. But at the same time, you know, and a lot of this conversation that we're talking about is all about two sides of the same coin. And on the one hand, I try to be the type of person where if you step to me, I don't care if you're wearing a suit and you look like a CEO, or if you tell me that you're the janitor of the building, because I want to treat you with the same amount of time and respect. Because today's CEO can be tomorrow's janitor, and today's janitor can be tomorrow's CEO. So you never know who you're talking to. And I've been treated like shit in the past where, like, I remember when, like, I was young, I remember one time really early on, like, I was called in to have a meeting with Gianni Versace when I was really young. And I brought my portfolio and I walked into the front building of the Versace headquarters, and the security guy was like, "You have to take the service entrance." And I was like, "I'm here to meet, I don't care, take the service entrance." Like, he thought I was like delivering food or some shit. And then, like, I remember when I walked out the front of the building, he was like, "I thought I told you you had to I was like, "No, I'm walking out the front of this building," you know? And so, like, he misjudged it. Like, his radar was off on me. And I try to take the high road and think, like, no, he was just doing his job. But his radar was off. So what I try to do is, while I try to treat everyone with that equal level of respect, I also I'm a New Yorker, and I've got like one guard up at the same time, and I sleep with one eye open also, because there are a lot of motherfuckers out there that are trying to get one over and like take advantage of, you know, you give them an inch and they take a mile. And you just have to really be careful of those individuals too, because they are there to extract, not add to your life.
Yeah. And you get a lot more gray hair.
But I see a lot of, and I hear a lot of friends that can't, for whatever reason, accept that people are trying to take advantage of them. Even if every one of your other friends are like, that person is bad energy for you, they continue to interact with them. It's very strange. What is the reason for that? Is it like a codependence kind of thing where like...
It depends on each person individually and like what drives them, you know, like what they're getting out of that relationship that they feel they need to keep hanging on to it. And, you know, there also could be some of those themes of like Stockholm syndrome, not into that like level, you know, of actually like...
What is the Stockholm syndrome?
Like kind of like forgiving your abuser and just like, you know, just having someone in your life who you try to give them the benefit of the doubt essentially, and you know, you almost romanticize it in a way. And it's not obviously on that extreme of it, but I think there are some qualities that, you know, are aligned where, you know, you have people that just are toxic in your life and they're treating you like shit and they're taking advantage of you, and there's probably times that, like, you know, we as people even are aware of that, and yet we continue to let it happen, and it's really hard to just like set the boundary and be like, peace, I'm out, like I can't deal with this. But yeah, it gets to a point, because the more you entertain that and take that on, the less like you're just taking more away from yourself. So, and
going back to those 24 hours, there's no time for those toxicities in your life. Like you can't even offer an hour to those things in your life, because look, I just broke it down. There's probably only 4 hours left. You're going to give a quarter of your available mind space to this toxic thing in your life? Like, no way. And then and people out there who are listening to this, who have someone or something toxic in their life, you know as well as I do, you're not spending an hour. You're spending 5 hours a day on like dealing with that. You know what I mean?
Either mentally,
physically, thinking about it after they've left for like 3 hours, then complaining to your actual good friend about your bad friend for 3 hours. Like, everyone's gone through that, you know?
And on every level, whether it be in business, friendships, even family members at times.
That's the toughest part, is when it is a family member, because you're thinking, no, that's my blood. They're supposed to be down for me 100%. I mean, unfortunately, I've learned that, like, just because they're blood doesn't mean they're looking out for your best interests. That's like the hardest one to get over,
So when it comes to your career, and aside from all of the people in your life, has there ever been a point where you've ever felt really low? or maybe you were losing hope in the brand, or just things weren't going your way.
Absolutely, yeah.
How did you kind of get through that, overcome it, and not let it consume your headspace?
Yeah, the first 5 years of Staple were like mission impossible. It was like nearly, on the verge of going out of business every day. And in the 5th year, I was over it. I was really done. And I was really ready to hang it up. And I actually remember sitting down in my office with, I think I had like 4 employees at the time. And I said, I'm done. Like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm in debt. I can't really pay you guys anymore. I can't pay for the rent of the studio. I'm done. And they actually said to me, I'll never forget this. They actually said to me, Jeff, like, we went on this journey with you, and you took us out into the middle of the ocean on this boat ride. You have to get us to the other side of the ocean now. Like, we are relying on you to help us get there. And so going back to that idea of like having the fam and the home front be your rock and your solitude, they did it in a really like sort of tough love kind of way, where it's like, no, we need you to step up right now and like complete this journey, was exactly what I needed to be like, yeah, this is bigger than me just complaining about some pain that I have and not thinking about the community that I've built, both in my employees, but also in fans of the brand and people who are just listening. Like, I just owed it beyond myself to like do that, And when they told me that, it was like, it was the kick in the ass that I needed.
Yeah. And I think too, like when that kind of stuff happens, oftentimes our brains go to like, well, in order, I got them there on this boat, I have to get now the same boat or like a yacht to get them to the other side. But it's not even that. Sometimes you just need to get them with an inner tube and like pull them along to make it, just get through.
Yep. It's not about getting a speedboat and like, let's go. It's like, no, let's just keep rowing. Let's go.
Yeah.
We got this.
And eventually.
Yep. I think it felt good that like there was a sense of isolation that I had prior to that, where I felt like it was all me or nothing. But then when I heard that, it was like, oh wow, I have a team, ready to sacrifice with me.
Yeah. And that, I can imagine, it creates a lot of just like reliability in people and feel value. Having people who are there, like literally ride or die. Like that is.
Yep. Exactly. It's amazing.
Speaks volumes.
Yeah.
So on the opposite side of that.
Yeah.
What are some of the highs?
There's so many highs, and I think I've learned to be a fairly even-keeled person, where like I agonize over the lows in the same manner in which I celebrate the highs. And I think when you see people that like go ham celebrating, they tend to be the same people that like get really down. It's like a big roller coaster. And so when something amazing happens, I'm just like, that was dope. All right, what's next? Let's keep it moving, And it's often like when you see, if you ever see, sports, and like when they interview the athlete and they're round one, you've made the playoffs. What do you think for the finals? No, game 2. That's it. We got to get through game. I don't care about game 7. It's game 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when they ask you at halftime, what do you think about game 2? No, it's the second half of this game. And so when I hit an accomplishment, it's just, all right, what's the next move? And Staple has been just a social experiment of consistency. Yeah. It's just left, right for 25 years. Yeah. And that's it. Like, there's no secret. It's just, there's no overnight injection of like, oh my God, what was this like huge thing that happened like so fast? No, it wasn't fast. It was just boop, 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 boop.
Yeah. It seems too like you're celebrating the small victories along the way.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, I think that sets a lot of people up for failure, is expecting the wins to only be these like championship rings, and they don't have to be big wins. It's sometimes like getting out of bed in the morning is a small victory for people, and being able to acknowledge those and I think that's what keeps us going.
Yep. Being very thankful for the little things is so critical.
Yeah.
The smallest little things, whether it's like, it could be anything. Like, it could just be like hearing a positive word from, a coworker or a client or a customer, or just, even, it doesn't even have to come from the outside. It could just come from like within yourself. and celebrating those the same way you celebrate like a massive win is so critical, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
So when it comes to your feelings, your emotions, how do those come out in your designs? Or do they have an influence on the way that you design?
I would guess. I try not to be too prescriptive about it. I think some of the things that inspire my core values do inevitably come out in what we do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always tried to not make Staple about like a very specific image in my mind, you know? Like going back to my identity of being Asian, like I was sort of trying to hide the fact that I was Chinese for the first few years of Staple because I didn't want Staple to be like the best Chinese-owned streetwear brand. I just wanted it to be. But that also at the same time means muting who you are. Like because I didn't want to do that, I didn't want to put Asian-inspired things in my design because I didn't want it to be about that, you know?
Yeah.
And so I really try to make Staple, as the name pertains, an essential thing for everyone. And in doing that, there's a bit of watering down who I personally am in order to make it appeasable to like lots of different people, whereas other designers are so charismatic and so iconic that it's like you're not even really prescribing to the clothing or the designs, you're prescribing to the person and whatever the person does, you know? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's like a great philosophy to have, but like I just want it to be more about like Jeff created this thing and this thing is pretty awesome, even though it doesn't necessarily always directly tie to like what we see of Jeff, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting, yeah, because I think too, like, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, our feelings come out in some way, shape, or form. You know, even if like your shoe choice of the day, and you might not be aware of like, why did I choose those shoes today? And you look back a week from, and you're like, oh, I was actually really excited, and I wore like a bright, colorful pair, or you know, I wore a really dark pair, and that reflected my mood. You know, so things like that, like it comes out, you know, in weird ways, and it's also a good way to kind of, you know, check yourself and see, you know, what's going on. For a lot of people who have a hard time tapping into their emotions and seeing, it's a good way to kind of like look back and reflect on, you know, what's.
I think people have like a lot of people have trouble listening to themselves, right? Like I think you said it, like they check themselves. Their initial gut reaction is like, I want to put these on, I want to wear this, I'm feeling this, but then they're like, but wait, maybe I shouldn't be like that. Maybe this says something else. Like, no, just go with the first one. Go with the first gut instinct. It's usually right.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to all of your projects and all of your creations, obviously your dunks are really something that is the biggest standout piece. And it, you know, obviously there's more to you than your pigeon dunks. Obviously they're iconic, but there's a lot of other iconic collaborations, projects, products that you've put out into this world. So when it comes to those, are there any, maybe aside from the dunk, that you really value, that you really wish got more hype, more clout per se, because you genuinely were just like super excited? And
I mean, there's so many. It's been a long run, and there's been a lot of things, and I'm proud of so many. They're like all my little kiddies and children, you know. The pigeon dunk is definitely like the most popular kid in the class out of like all those kids, and I feel blessed that I was able to create something that was that iconic. It's a little bit of a gift and a curse because the shadow that the pigeon casts is so big and dark that these other things, and I always have to remind myself that like if my peers or competitors, if they created any of these other things that are in the shadow of the pigeon, it'd be like a lifetime accomplishment. But I have to just applaud myself that like even though they don't get the shine that they deserve, it's because I built this other thing that is like, you know, crazy, and that's the gift and the curse. And I mean, I'll freely admit that one of the biggest chips that I have on my shoulder is when someone out there in the interwebs says, all Jeff ever did was put a pigeon on the back of a shoe. That's it. And when I hear that, I used to get so livid, mad about like I used to be like, let me send you these links. I'll show you what I did, you know? But now what I do now is I internalize that to spin it in my head and say, you know what? I need to do a better job of educating people on what I've did and what I've accomplished and what I've shared. Not like that's not your bad for not knowing what I've done. It's my bad for not being able to articulate it and explain it. So let me try to do that in a meaningful way to you. Yeah. That's how I've tried to like sort of take the high road, if you will, versus being like, what do you know? You know? Yeah.
That's interesting. That is a good spin to put on it. A challenging spin, because it adds more pressure.
Yeah. But if you're confident in what you've produced, then it's a fun challenge to be like, wait, let me figure out how to like better articulate this. Yeah. I'm obviously not doing a good job. If all you're seeing is that pigeon on the back of a gray shoe, I'm not doing a good enough job, you know? Yeah.
So speaking of articulating messages, when it comes to, you know, the last year we just had, 2020 was an awful year, to put it frank. Mental health was something that I think is definitely at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And, you know, whether you never experienced mental health or, you know, we're in denial that you've experienced mental health struggles prior to 2020, I think, you know, kind of put us into a corner where we really had to come face to face. Yeah. And, you know, with that being said, mental health now has also very much become a buzzword. Everywhere is talking about it, which is a good thing in some aspects, but there's, you know, America is a very capitalistic country, and that's the whole thing too. So, you know, when it comes to brands promoting mental health initiatives, what are your thoughts on that? I
think it's great. I mean, I think brands obviously have a following and a loyalty audience that if you can direct that energy from just cop my shoes, cop my clothes to now awareness, I think it's what they should be doing, you know, because a brand really has, in my opinion, like 3 options, right? You either use the power of your brand to promote something that is positive, or you don't say anything about positivity, right? And you just go about your business, or you shut down. And if you shut down, then 50 people don't have jobs now, you know what I mean? And so like, that's really all you can do. And so I'm going to choose, you know, to redirect that skill set that a creator gave me to make coveted product and make people camp outside of stores and, you know, go have 5 phones at the same time trying to get products. I want to harness that energy into something where it's needed. And I'd like to think that we've had really great success in doing that. Like, everyone plays their sort of individual part in what they can do to help the cause. Some people are single-handedly out there in the streets protesting. Some people are doing it in the voting booth. Yeah. And I think my God-given gift, obviously, is this shit. But in the grand scheme of like a pandemic year, making cool shoes is very low on the importance totem pole. Like, if there was a Survivor Island, the guy who makes sneakers and streetwear is the first one to go off the island. You know what I mean? Like, we don't need you here. But if I can now harness that into like raise $25,000 in one day for a charity, or like get thousands of people to like enact on this thing, like that's the best I can do. You know, that's my contribution to this cause.
And I think, you know, for me, something I've struggled with being a professional in the mental health space is, you know, the idea of like the responsibility that brands have when they do initiatives, and whether it be mental health, whether it be social justice of any type, you know, to make sure that there are some items within that given beyond just, you know, this is a shirt for mental health, or this is a hoodie for mental health. Like, you know, at the end of the day, that's great. Yeah. But, you know, what exactly is that hoodie doing, you know, for my mental health? Are you, you know, working with professionals? Are you giving back? Are you sharing resources? Are you giving people actual tools that they can use to actually improve their mental health? Right. So, you know, that's where, you know, I'm really happy we're having this conversation, because I think you sharing your story goes beyond the hoodie and the t-shirt. You know, it has, there's so many people who look up to you, and the fact that you're being vulnerable and talking about your experiences, like, is just like proof that, you know, we can all do it, and we can all get there.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, hopefully, I love that there's like this initiative and the intention is good, but I think we need to like continue to actually give people those tools. So yeah, it's a touchy subject for me, I think, and I have a love-hate relationship at times.
Yeah, well, there's a fine line between like exploitation and support, Yeah. And there's definitely brands that are out there, whether it's Earth Day or BLM or AAPI or mental health, they're just out there being like, this is our new campaign, and then the second Earth Day is over, it's like, stop the recycling.
Yeah, and that's something I do, too, is when it comes to mental health, like, this is awesome you're having this conversation publicly on the external, but internally, what are you doing for your employees? Are you creating spaces for them that cater to their mental health? Are you making sure that they're good mentally before you put this message out there? Are you practicing what you preach, per se? So, that's also where I try to make sure accountability is when it comes to these initiatives. And for you, I'm curious, like, when did you realize taking care of your mental health was important?
I mean, it was 2020. That was really it. I mean, I hadn't seen a therapist until 2020. And I realized that I was so involved in the business and the rat race, if you will, that I didn't really check my brain and my soul. I think when people think of self-care, they immediately think of like physical things, like how's my cardio, how's my skincare routine, or like am I able to like still go this hard on the treadmill or bench this, which is because those are like the obvious things that you can just see physically in front of you. And so I remember when I turned like 35 or something, I was like, I need to take care of my health. And it meant like getting a trainer, going to the gym and doing that, but still never observing what was going on in my brain and my soul. And it wasn't until 2020, like you said, where people were up against a wall, where finally like you had nowhere to look but in a mirror at yourself, literally in your home, for many hours a day, and then like really take a self-examination of who you are. And it dawned on me that like, why is it that every year from when you're a kid, you have to do an annual physical, but you don't have to do an annual mental? Why? Yeah. Right? It's so strange. And like,
and it's interesting because when I used to work for a foster care organization, we would have to. That was, and for nonprofits and social service agencies, like there are requirements, but if you're not involved in those systems, then
you're supposed to be good.
Yeah,
you're supposed to be fine.
Yeah.
And if you got to go see a mental care specialist, we have a problem. But it doesn't. I think it's because we let it go that far that there is a problem. But if we did like periodic checkups on your mental, it would be so much better. Yeah. But the stigma is crazy. Like I remember I told family members like, oh yeah, I'm seeing my therapist on Saturday. What's wrong? What's the problem? Like, nothing.
Yeah.
I like her a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting thing, when people think about going to therapy, it's automatically that first thought is there's something wrong with you. Yeah. And it's wild to me because, when you think about your physical health, we do all these precautionary things of going to the gym, going to the doctor. Yep. And it's so accepted. So that's really like physical fitness is the way to prevent our physical health from developing any conditions. Mental fitness and going to therapy and self-care, all those types of practices is a way to prevent our mental health from developing any conditions.
And I feel bad saying this to you, but like, I don't look forward to seeing my therapist.
Yeah, no. I go to therapy myself as a therapist, and there's times I'm like, oh, this is a chore.
It's the same feeling I get when I have to see my trainer at the gym. Like, I don't want to go. I really don't want to go. But every time after I see my trainer, I'm happy that I saw my trainer. And every time in the first 20 minutes of my therapy session, I'm like, I'm so glad I did this, But going into it, I don't know, I think it's just decades of training that this muscle in your head is supposed to be shut like a clam, and you're not supposed to open it up to people, particularly strangers, right? But once you start peeling back the layers, it feels so liberating to be able to talk to somebody about this stuff that, quite frankly, with friends and family, everyone's got like a prejudgment or an association with you that you can't just explode all the feelings, you know? So you need that sort of third party, non-biased, agnostic point of view.
Yeah. And that's the thing, you know, we're here as professionals to help, you know, our clients kind of connect the dots on certain patterns or themes, whether that be helpful patterns or unhelpful patterns, or, you know, help them notice some blind spots that they might not see. Because when we're in a repetitive cycle of just living our lives, it's, you know, hard to sometimes see what, you know, it's routine to us, it's normal, you know, so we don't know that it's not normal until someone else who's trained can help us see that.
Would you say the same philosophy applies where if you don't feel like you're gelling well with your therapist, that it's okay to like find somebody new?
100%.
Yeah, I think you have to like really, if you feel like just something not jiving well with your therapist after like, I would say maybe 3 or 4 sessions, I would love to hear your opinion on it too.
Well, I mean, my next question actually for you was going to be, how did you find your therapist? Because, you know, when it comes to therapy, finding a therapist that's the right fit for you is like the biggest, most important piece of it. Because that relationship, you want to feel comfortable talking to this person. You want to also make sure you're going to someone who's trained and has expertise in what you need. Because, you know, someone that might specifically work with like addiction or substance use, or, you know, I primarily specialize in millennials and Gen Z and creative industries. Like that's what I'm working on in private practice. So, you know, like middle-aged mom in like the suburbs, probably not my ideal client, and that's okay. And I know going into that consultation that I have to be upfront with her and be like, look, like this is probably not going to mesh well. But I think, you know, when you're looking for a therapist, it's important to, you know, think of it as I'm hiring this person to be the role of my therapist in my life. So when you are looking for therapists, schedule consultations with 3 to 5 people. Take those 15-minute calls. They should be free. There should not be any therapist charging a consultation fee. If they do, find someone else. And, you know, really ask them the questions, like what their style is as a therapist, like what their trainings are, what their experience is like. You know, sometimes the questions that I get asked are like, what is your ideal client? I don't really have an ideal client, but I have an area that I specialize in, and that area is my ideal client. So, you know, it's hard, and there are matchmaking services out there. There's a couple out there that will actually take that legwork out of it for you, because it is hard. Like, you know, there's so many different therapy models out there. There's cognitive behavioral therapy. There's, you know, psychodynamic, systems theory, like all these different theories and models that we pull from. And just because like I'm trained in CBT or trauma-focused CBT, that does not mean the next therapist is. And, you know, knowing what those models treat, and it's confusing, and the normal human doesn't know that. So,
I mean, one of the benefits of COVID is that it's opened up this world of like online virtual therapy, where before I think there's this image of you having to like lay down on the, you know, the couch and everything. So I've been all doing all virtual, and I found my therapist via, I forgot which website. Is Betterment one of them? Is that one? BetterHelp. BetterHelp. So like you answer a survey question, and then they hook you up with someone. And I was pretty lucky because I was 1 for 1. Like the first one I found was really great. And it's funny, in one of the first sessions that, like, again, I dreaded going to, one of the ways I knew that like she was the one for me was like, I'm like dreading going, and she's like, why are you in therapy doing this? I was like, I don't even really know. Like, I just want to see like what kind of fine tuning, but I don't actually think I need it, you know? I went in with that mentality. And then like, I remember after like halfway through the first session, I'm still clammed up. I'm still like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. This is probably a waste of time. And she's just asking questions. She's like, okay, it's about to get a little weird. And I was like, whatever, you know? And in 3 questions, she had me bawling. And she was playing me like the Queen's Gambit. She was just like, boop, checkmate in 3 moves. She just knew it. And in 3, I was just like, like, it was just so, I was like, and then afterwards I was like, yo, how did you A, do that, and B, know I was going there, you know? And every session now she's able to just peel away that that layer that needs to be touched. Yeah, it's pretty
wild.
dope. It's wild when you're that in sync with your patient.
And that's the thing too. Like a lot of clients will be like, "Well, I don't think I need this, or this isn't for me," because in here everything that we think, everything that we feel is all up here. And sometimes taking it from here and saying it out loud is what
a mile.
is the tipping point.
This distance could be a mile long.
Yeah. And so that's what creates a lot of resistance, because inside of our heads, but it's for whatever reason, it's very hard to say it out loud, because once you say it out loud, it puts that level of concreteness behind it.
Yeah.
And you're fully acknowledging what you're going through.
And it's like societal pressure that is like a border between your brain and your vocal cords. That's like, I shouldn't say that, I can't say that, I don't want to say that about him, her, that, this, that, and the third. And it's like, but this distance is so hard to break. It's crazy. Yeah.
And there's a lot of there's a lot of feelings associated with just like saying it out loud. Just like saying things that we as a society deem unacceptable to say or not normal to say.
The other thing that's a long distance that I found is the distance from your ear to your brain. Because sometimes she'll say like, "What did I just say?" She'll be like, what did I just say? And I'll be like, I don't know. She's like, exactly. I knew you were muting what I was saying because it's not what you wanted to hear. So I'm going to say it again. I was like, damn, you're good.
Yeah. And sometimes hearing that, from that non-biased person is like, whew.
Yeah.
Obviously, you hear that from a family member or a friend, and that just starts a fight.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Yep.
But when it comes to your mental health, I noticed you mentioned before, like just saying, you were talking and saying how you can notice your blood boiling, but there are a lot of physical symptoms when it's not just our thoughts and our emotions. We do experience like sweaty hands, heart beating faster. What are those symptoms for you? Like, how do you notice like when you're starting to develop like symptoms of anxiety or depression?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually spent a lot of years like looking within myself to understand when I feel levels of discomfort and then to move away from that situation. But there's other feelings of uncomfort that are good. Like when I released the pigeon dunks, that day when things were hitting the fan, there was a level of fear and anxiety that was happening, which frankly at the time I couldn't process it, but now like when I replicate that feeling, I know it's like a scary but good thing. We talked about snowboarding, and we're both snowboarders. It's like when you advance from blue square to black diamond and you're like and then you go and you feel elation after that. Like that's something that I love. But there's this other feeling and they're really close, but they're different, is when like you start to feel hot inside from like anger or stress, and discerning those two things is really key. And then learning how to also cool down. And I'm speaking about myself. Everyone else, like you said, will have a different, someone will get sweaty palms. Someone like, their eye will start twitching or something like that. But like whenever you get that signal that your body is telling you to like, it's a self-defense mechanism is what it is. Learning how to like tone that stuff down is really key. But then also, like when I'm in a therapy session, I know that's a safe spot to almost let it boil over, because I'm under a trained eye to like, I want her to see how this all oozes out,
Yeah. I did a training the other day, and the instructor of the training had said something that I really like, because it's a visual like teaching component. But when we're in that state of feeling those symptoms of anxiety, depression, the feels, as people say, normally, like, if this is our brain, this is like all of the capacity our brain has when we're at equilibrium. Our thoughts, our logic, everything is flowing. We have the ability to think about all the things and respond appropriately. But then when we go into that state, this is the capacity. So, it makes sense when you're flustered and you can't find the right words. You can't, think of the things you want to think about and bring up as key points, or just try and pull from all the content here. This is all we have to pull from. So it makes sense. With that is essentially why we have to do those coping skills, the grounding skills, to go from here back to here. That's essentially what happens internally for us. And I think that's a really good way to describe it to anyone watching, that that's why the deep breathing, the meditations, all that stuff is important. And
the breath work is so important.
Yeah.
That's interesting, this analogy, because when else I feel like this? When I get caught in like a social media black hole. Like, when you just start, you pull out your phone, I want to look at Instagram for like 10 minutes, and then like 2 hours have passed. I feel like my brain is like falling into quicksand. Yeah. And that's when I feel like someone has to throw me like a lifeline and pull me out of that quicksand. I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. Yeah. Because it's like designed to make you go into that hole. Yeah.
It's wild. So what are some of your, coping skills or, ways to practice self-care?
Besides seeing the therapist, you mean? Oh, on the daily basis? Yeah. Routines help me a lot. Yeah. Like going through the motions of things that, even if they're not the most efficient or like, expeditious, like I go through them every day anyway. Like my morning cup of coffee, for example, is like really important for me. I hand grind it, I hand pour it, like it takes 15 minutes. It's not instant. It's a pain in the ass.
You and Jimmy Butler can start your own coffee shop.
Cool, we should. But yeah, like I make sure that I carve out the mornings for that. I also don't like being rushed for that reason, but other reasons in the morning. So if I have to be somewhere early, I try to like give myself the hour and a half or 2 hours to just do it in my own pace. I think just knowing what stresses you out and then putting in measures to prevent those things from happening is really key, and just not setting yourself up for disastrous situations to your soul and to your brain when they could be avoided. There's not a lot of things in life that you can control, honestly speaking, and don't let those things bother you when they go haywire, because you couldn't control them anyway. It was out of your control, so don't stress it. But the things that you can control that make you happy and make you, content, you should control those few things, because you actually can sort of navigate the outcome of how that goes. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think too, like, you mentioned before, even boundary setting, like that's another way to practice self-care. Obviously, like exercise. Lately, what I've been doing for self-care is building Lego.
Nice.
It just it's like the way that I practice mindfulness, because I'm not good at meditation. So I will sit and I build Lego, and I enjoy it because it really just forces me to be present in the moment. I'm not on my phone. I'm following directions. And I just built Cinderella's castle the other day. So we have like 2 more questions left. This one here, I'm curious to see what your opinion is. How do you think hypebeast culture plays a role in one's mental health?
It's not great. And I don't want to badmouth the business hypebeast, but the hype culture, let's call it.
Hype culture.
Yeah, it's hypebeast as a company.
Love hypebeast. Yes. Great people.
No, hype culture is not great, because I think it rides along the same things of like the dopamine triggers that social media does, that chase game, am I trending? Who's at the top of the page? Who's whack? They've got like ranking lists now, and comments, and the like buttons are everywhere, and it's just a never-ending rat race. I've been there. Like I've been at 98,000 followers, and I couldn't wait until the 100 came, and then when the 100 came, it's sort of like bittersweet and anticlimactic, and then what's the most depressing thing? Like when 101 comes, because then you're just back at the bottom of the barrel, like, when am I going to get to 200 now? And it takes forever, and then you're like chasing the 200, and that happens. My friends have like 48 million followers, and they're like, when am I going to get to 50 million followers? Like, it's literally the same feeling as the kid who has 99 followers and is trying to get that 100th one. So it's programmed to make you always wanting, It's like, I was watching this mini doc the other day about like how they train monkeys, you know, to get a treat whenever they pull this lever, right? Like pull a lever, get a treat, pull a lever, get a treat. Eventually what they found was that when they took the treat away, they still pulled the lever. They just enjoyed pulling the lever, you know? And so that's
classical conditioning or operant.
We are pulling the lever when we do this. We're pulling, we just keep doing it, you know, we just keep hoping for that thing. We don't even need the treat at the end anymore. We just want like the instant satisfaction, gratification. So just be cognizant of that there are forces out there that are designed to essentially brainwash you. And again, going back to things you can control, you can't control that. You can't storm into Mark Zuckerberg's office and say, stop doing this, right? You can't control that. Yeah. But what you can control is how you interact with those things and how you navigate around that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So like my partner, she just recently turned on that feature on your phone that shuts off your Instagram after 45 minutes of use. And then you're locked out for the whole day. And that's it. Yeah. So if you need to do that, do it.
Yeah. That's, boundaries.
Yep, exactly.
And it's, you know, also it goes into who you follow, what you engage with, you know, like you have a huge pull on your algorithm. And so what you do to create what you see and the content you consume is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
It's
what
interesting.
do they call that term where you fake like people?
I don't know.
Like where you like people just out of like politics or something, like because you're supposed to, and then that messes up your algorithm now because now they're just going to serve you more of that thing that you don't even really like.
And it creates more of like mental health problems. And I think even with like, you know, with sneaker culture, obviously we both, you know, love shoes and sneakers and it's a big part of our lives, but it is interesting and something I'm sure you've experienced, I've experienced myself, where you get to this point of like just wanting the next thing, the next drop that you have to have because for whatever reason it's limited or there's, you know, all this press around it or, you know, it's and then it gets to the point where like, you know, all these people are the influencers that are getting seated it before make you know, the marketing that goes into it and then like the press coverage the shoes get and the hype and the clout that it creates. Feeling like you have to have it to be part of this community, to like be cool and be the first person to get that photo taken so it can potentially get reposted by like a media company or, you know, like all of that and just like that whole process in and of itself. And then it's like, wait, am I getting these shoes because I genuinely like the story behind them and like the shoe?
Like them,
or am I getting them because everyone else is telling me that they're cool and I should have them? And that to me is like what you know, I fall into that often and I constantly am trying to check myself and be like, all right, what about the shoe is it that I like? And it's hard because you don't have that 3-day period to wait.
No.
You can't. I mean, you're lucky even if you get them. But
what you have to do is get better at discerning what you really want, what you really truly want. So I've moved 12 times I've moved 13 times in the last 12 years. And the reason why I bring that up is because when you move, you have to move your shoes and you get to see all the crap that you've accumulated. And you're like, wow, I've only worn that once, or I've never worn those before and I bought them, you know? So in moving, I've seen like what I've been wasting my money on and time and energy. And so I've built a more discerning eye of like, okay, when I see something nice and pretty and shiny on Instagram, I'm now like, I don't have to actually have that. I can just appreciate it, double tap it, comment, that's beautiful, but I don't have to actually go and cop it, you know? So I've been a lot more selective now about that accumulation of shoes. But I also don't want to get people down on buying shoes. Shoes are an amazing thing. They are works of art. They are storytelling vehicles. They're these beautiful objects of design for typically just like a couple $100. And like there's nothing else in the world that encompasses that much spirit into such a democratic thing, you know? So that's essentially why sneaker culture is what it is today, because there is nothing else like that. Before sneakers, you had to buy fine art or watches or like, you know, a sculpture in order to get that kind of like energy in something. So don't feel bad about copping shoes, but definitely like ask yourself, am I really gonna wear and or appreciate all of these things before you pull the trigger, because it does get addictive for sure.
Yeah, that is true.
Yep.
So my last question is, you know, I was reading your footwear news article that you did recently, and you know, discussed like that you've always been fighting like an identity crisis.
Yeah.
What you defined as an identity crisis. Being an Asian American, how has that identity crisis played a role, in your mental health? And how do you think, the AAPI community also kind of deals with mental health given, racism and everything that is kind of currently happening in today's society?
Yeah, I was mentioning that like I've been a minority from growing up in New Jersey, being the only Asian minority in my school, or one of 3 of 1,600, and then moving into the city and then entering into street culture, which was a predominantly black and brown community, being again the minority, and also having a lot of false stereotypes attached to having a clothing brand, especially being Chinese, i.e. the assumption that your parents own the factory that like your clothes are made in, that's how you got into this culture, or your parents must be Chinese billionaires that are funding you, otherwise how would a Chinese kid actually have a relevant streetwear brand, So again, being the minority and sort of fighting for who I represented and who I was. And then even now, after gaining some level of success, Asians are often portrayed as being the class that like can't be loud about their accomplishments and at the same time can't make a lot of noise when there's struggle. Like you just shh, be quiet. Like, and even our parents tell us to be quiet. Like I've gotten into issues where like I was like, Mom, we shouldn't allow this to happen. No, just be happy that they let us into this country. Like there's still that mentality here. So trying to, and then seeing all the things that have been happening in the news now and trying to fight that while standing up for what's right that's part of that whole identity challenge for me, is like how much do we do? And I'm so quasi envious when I see like the BLM movement, in the sense that like how unified and empowered they are, and for us it's a struggle to sort of get out there and make a lot of noise and stand up. And it's so dope to actually see black and brown people helping Asian people, because they know they need voices to help and they need that unity. So it's really dope to see all of us coming together. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you too. This was an amazing session. Send me your bill and we'll get that taken care of. No, but this was great. I hope people watching get something out of this, that like this is not a rarity. Like this can be had, if you take care of yourself and you find someone that you trust, that you can speak to. This is something that should be normal in your life. It's really a nice feeling.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll be able to share some resources in combination with this video, so there is anyone who's watching and is struggling with your mental health, we'll be able to give you some places to check out in order to get that taken care of.
Yep.